CURES, sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to the CURES Show. This is where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. And I love when science intersects with spirit. I'm Kara Sundlin. So do you believe in the power of intuition? It's not woo-woo. Emma Seppala is a Yale scientist, and she's the author of the book Sovereign. She explains the science behind intuition and how it actually helps us become happier if we know how to use it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Cara. It's great to be here.
As I said, I love when science intersects with topics that some people will say, woo-hoo, it's intuition. But
Yes.
here you are, have spent the last 25 years studying happiness at Yale. You couldn't get more science than Yale. And you have found that there is a lot of reason why we would want to know how to use our intuition.
Absolutely. So we all are wired for intuition. You could think of it as instinct. You could think of it as gut feeling. I think we've all experienced what it's like to have a gut feeling. One example is my friend Kushal, who was in one of the Twin Towers during 9/11, and the guards were saying, stay in the building, and his intuition said to run, and he ran and he saved his life by a hair. How does that happen, right? And there is research now to show that intuition is a skill that we are wired for, that our brain is also wired for, and that we can hone as well.
So how do we know if we're really accessing our intuition instead of maybe some other part, like the angry roommate in our head who's telling us the wrong thing?
Yes, no, absolutely. And that's why it's really good to know yourself through things like meditation or therapy or whatever it is that you use, because you want to make sure it's actually an intuition that's telling you not to do something, not just a fear of, oh, I'm scared to go on stage. My intuition says I should not go speak in front of people, right?
That might be your fear topic.
Yeah, exactly. And so there it's really good to know what's happening. And what the research shows is it's good to tap into your intuition, but then also use your reason. So usually in school and just in society in general, we're taught to use our reason only and to dismiss any other kind of feelings. However, we pick things up physiologically all the time. And those are cues that are designed to guide us and even save our lives, as in the case of Kushal.
So obviously education is important, book smarts, academics, all of that. But if we only do that and not actually come down in our body and feel what we're feeling, then we're only getting half the picture?
We're only getting half the picture. Let me give you a concrete example. So have you heard of equine facilitated therapy?
Horse therapy.
Yeah, that's when a therapist uses a horse with a patient, right? So, okay, so I'm going to give you an example around that. So, I think we've all experienced having sort of a strange feeling around someone. Anyone can relate to the idea of sometimes not feeling right around someone, just wanting to back off, but not understanding it intellectually. What's going on there? So let's go to equine facilitated therapy. If a child, if the patient comes up and they pretend they're not scared of the horse, and they're like, I'm not scared, I'm just fine, but they're scared, the horse is moving all over the place, extremely anxious. What's going on here? The horse doesn't understand English, but can register inauthenticity. Physiologically, we can register when someone else is being inauthentic, and they register it as threat. Same thing with humans. So research shows that if, let's say, I were angry and I was masking and I was pretending not to be angry, your heart rate would go up. You wouldn't understand intellectually why you would want to back away from me or not feel comfortable, but it's physiologically, you're able to read me much, much quicker than your intellect would be able to follow. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. And let me ask you this, in science, does it show that one sex is better? Are women more intuitive than men? That's generally the thought. Is it true?
So I think that's a really interesting question. What research shows is that when you're more open to experience, then you are more likely to have intuitive insight. So meaning you're someone who is open to learning about new things, exploring new things. That's one type of personality that is more intuitive, and the other is if you think more in pictures, so perhaps you could think of a more creative or artistic mindset, you are also going to be more intuitive. I don't know of gender differences.
Okay. All right, so when we say, okay, I can really easily visualize, or sometimes in athletes do this, we know there's a lot of science behind athletes visualizing how themselves winning ahead of time. So when we're visualizing, we're doing things like that, we're using that part of ourselves, we're helping train our intuition?
Yes, so often people will say, well, how do I tap into my intuition? And that's when I ask, okay, so when you're working on a problem, I think we've all had that where either at home or at work, we're trying to figure out, like, how am I going to solve this problem? And all of a sudden you get an aha moment. Like, Cara, for you, what kind of activities are you doing when you have those kind of insights?
A lot of times, because I'm a busy mom, and you can relate to that with your 3 kids home. Thank you for being here, because I know they're under the weather, and you came to the appearance anyway. But as a busy mom, it's usually when I'm alone in the car or alone in the shower, because I'm not distracted.
Exactly. And what happens when you're driving or you're in the shower is your brain goes into alpha wave mode, which means it's not highly focused, like you're not on your phone or you're not doing something focused, but you're also not so relaxed you're about to pass out. It's that in-between space. So a lot of people will say, oh, I get these great ideas in the shower, right? But it's because your mind goes into this relaxed space, and that is when research shows our brain is in active problem-solving mode.
Wow.
And that's when we're most likely to get our aha insights and those sort of creative or intuitive moments.
So I have read that, you know, even with kids and studying, you know, they get so stressed, or we're trying to learn something, that one of the things we should do is take breaks and just stare and do nothing. Is that because when we can kind of just breathe and daydream or let our mind wander, we think that's wasting time?
That's right.
You would say it's not.
It's not. And we live in a culture where we pride just go, 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 do all the time.
Yeah.
But as we do that, as we rob ourselves of those moments of meditative mindsets, really of a relaxed mindset, we are robbing ourselves of our innovative, intuitive, and creative potential. And so I would say take those moments off, take those breaks, take those vacations, take your weekends, take your evenings. You're going to come back to work actually in a better frame of mind to be as productive as you could be.
Yeah. So what about if we really, what does science tell us? What has your research shown about, let's say we're really trying to figure out the best way to handle something. We're trying to problem solve. Do we go to bed thinking about it, ask for some guidance, and then do we dream about it? Do we wake up with it? Like, you know, sometimes intuition doesn't happen on our timetable is what's frustrating, right?
That's right. I would say maximize those kind of activities that put you in a relaxed mindset, whether it's meditating, whether it's walking the dog, whatever it is, just relax. And I think we all can relate to this, that, you know, our aha moments come when we least expect it, but when we are relaxed, not when we're in this sort of highly stressed mode. What research also shows, neuroscience shows, that when we're making decisions that are very complicated, as opposed to, let's say, a decision that's simple, like, let's say you broke a table and you need a new coffee table. Okay, so you got to go buy a new coffee table. It's not a complex decision. But let's say you got a job in another town and it involves moving your kids into different schools, buying a new place. Your spouse has to figure out a new job, etc. That's a complex decision. And what research, neuroscience shows is that when a decision is very complex, you're going to make a better decision if you go from your gut, from your feeling. So when things are complicated, you're going to actually end up with a better decision if you go with your gut. If it's simple, you don't have to.
So if you're not used to leaning on your intuition, how can we get more comfortable with it and know that we're doing this the right way?
I can't say that you will always know if it is your intuition or, like I said earlier, your fear, etc. But I would say maximizing times in your life where you are allowing yourself to go into those aha brainwave states, where you are, and meditation is a really great one. So is going out into nature. So research shows that when people go out into nature unplugged without their phone for 3 days, they come back with 50% increased creativity, 50% increased insight. So just think about it. I mean, you're in a creative profession, so many of us are, and in fact, creativity is the #1 trait that CEOs look for in incoming employees across the world. Because if you can't innovate, it doesn't matter how hard you work. But
aren't they stressed because they don't have their phone?
Exactly. That's really interesting, because research also shows that people are so uncomfortable being by themselves that we've not learned to be by ourselves, and people prefer to give themselves electric shocks than to sit in a room doing nothing, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But we need to learn to be able to be with ourselves, to be able to relax. That's actually when we're going to tap into that innovative and intuitive potential.
Right. I actually, and maybe not for 3 days in the woods, but I actually, maybe because I don't get enough of it, I actually look forward to alone time and enjoy that alone time. But sometimes I'll think I'm reading a book on my phone. I try not to look at social media, but I'm reading a book or listening to music, or sometimes the idea of being a mom and having my phone in a different room, like I'm going to be missing a text from that could be important, you know, from someone in my family. Is there anything about just the phone being around that gets in the way of it? Or if it makes you more comfortable to just put it on Do Not Disturb or read on it, is that okay, or that really interferes?
Well, I would say that, you know, what the phones often do is we interrupt ourselves to look at it, even if it's not beeping at us, right? And so we've gotten into sort of an addictive, compulsive mode of going for the phone. And it does rob us of our ability to just be in the present moment, to be with what is. I mean, what I would say is put it on Do Not Disturb, except, you know, your children's names, right? For example.
But like, you don't have to like go to the woods for 3 days and leave your phone.
You don't have to go to the woods for 3 days, but you could go to the woods for an hour without your phone.
And what about silence? I think silence is so important, but we don't have that a lot in our society. Maybe that's why it's nice. I find myself, as I've gotten older with kids, I don't turn on music in the car. I don't. Sometimes I just want silence. Is silence important to reach that intuitive state?
Yes, silence is huge, especially in a world with so much noise. So when you have that silence, you're basically cutting off some of the major stimulation that's coming at us, right? And then you're in the car, you're just driving. You're also cutting off, you're not in a studio like we are here with screens everywhere, etc. And so as you shut off the stimulation, you're allowing yourself to come back into a state of calm and into a state of more relaxation and more into that alpha wave mode. Yeah.
So if you are, and you wrote a lot about this in your book, Sovereign, which is out now, it's available, but what did you mean by the title Sovereign? If we're coming from our intuition, does that naturally mean we're just more sovereign?
So with regard to intuition, I mean, we've been taught to really be rational, logical, and those are all fantastic tools. We need that in our life, but it's also cut us off from our own sort of natural instincts or intuitions or creative insights that are very individual to us and that we have learned to sort of shut off. But institutions like the military have been training people for intuition for decades. And even though that one of their programs was made fun of in a movie called Men Who Stare at Goats, they're still studying it now. There are new programs because there were so many service members that came back from Iraq and Afghanistan saying, and when they were asked, how come you saved all those people? Well, I decided to go down this road. I just had a feeling I should go down that road. There were so many reports of it that it's continuing to be a field of serious study. And in fact, the Marine Corps has an intuition training program that I interviewed a Marine about that for my book.
How do you train?
Well, in terms of the way that the Marine Corps does it, is that they train service members to be very deeply aware of what's going on around them.
So using their senses, like I've heard sometimes you want to say, what do you see, what do you feel, what do you this, it kind of brings you into the present moment.
It does. And so I think that there are a range of different ways that you can access your intuition. One is complete awareness of everything that's going on around you, especially if you're a military member, you're scouting for danger or signs of that something's off. Like they would say, oh, a playground that's usually busy being empty, that's a sign that something's off, right? And then, so you could think of it that way, and then you could think of it all the way towards the neuroscience I mentioned earlier. Joseph Michaels is the neuroscientist who does that research on decision making, and he calls it a gut feeling, it's an emotional feeling in the gut. So there's a range of ways in which we pick up intuitive insights. For example, I was talking about the physiological insights that we pick up from someone else, and when they're masking an emotion, our heart rate increases. So you see there are different ways: physiological, attention, emotion.
So is it, when we say gut feeling, is it actually a physical feeling in our gut? Is there intuition actually located there in a way, or?
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of our emotions we experience in this general area. So maybe that's why it's called gut feeling, because that's where we experience our emotions. Like we don't experience emotions in our foot, right? It's more into this upper body area.
Because sometimes they'll tell you, let's say, if you've ever practiced yoga or if you've ever even tried to meditate. Now, people will say, I can't meditate, my thoughts keep going. That's not the point, right? The point of meditation is we're practicing to kind of watch those thoughts. We're always going to have thoughts, I guess.
Yes.
But yoga will say, can we drop into our heart, or can you feel it in this part of your body?
Yes.
So the more we can learn to just feel where things are coming from, that helps.
I love that you said that, because we live in a time when we really could be so disembodied, right? We're in a virtual world, we're on social media, we're on Zoom, like we're just these talking heads. And we've often disconnected from our body, which can also happen through trauma and anxiety, where there's this sense of just always being up, 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 but not landing. And yet when you're present, when you can calm yourself down and when you come back into your body, you actually can reconnect with the feelings that are there.
Now, you are a Yale scientist, but this is also, if you listen to this and you didn't know you were a Yale scientist, you'd say, well, this also sounds quite spiritual. And do these points of reference, spirituality and science, do you see them intersecting a lot here?
Yes, and I think so much more science is needed for that, but you often hear that people, when they are in prayer or meditation, that they feel like they receive answers that they're looking for. I'll give you an example. Have you heard of Lynn Tilton?
No.
She owns the largest woman-owned business in America. She's an incredible woman, and she was a single mom in the 80s on Wall Street and had a baby and needed to provide for that baby and was working in banking. So, and was harassed every day. It was a very difficult sort of experience. But at age 30, 35, she's like, I'm out of here. I'm going to Florida. I'm retiring. And then when she went down to Florida, she had a sort of a spiritual experience, a meditative experience, where her deceased father came to her and he said, this is not what I had in mind for you. Now, her deceased father had died when she was a teenager, and she experienced firsthand what it's like to lose the main provider in a family. And her deceased father, the way she experienced that intuition was, he was saying, this is not what I had in mind for you. And so she decided to go out and purchase companies that had been left for dead. I mean, companies where everyone was like, this is going so downhill, we're not even going to try anymore. And she bought those companies in order to save people's jobs, and she turned them around. Companies like Styla Makeup, like companies we've heard of.
Right.
And she's been called the turnaround queen. She at one point was overseeing 700,000 employees. Now, other people would think, that's crazy. Why would you buy these companies? That's, guaranteed you're going to be bankrupt. No, she turned them around because she followed her gut. And when I interviewed her for my book, Sovereign, she said, I always go by my gut, but of course you also use your intellect.
Sure, she was trained, she worked on Wall Street, she had some cred to her thought, but like that feeling is just another reason. So we're going to continue this conversation. Leave it right there for 1 second. I just want to give everyone a quick message from our sponsor.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
All right, so welcome back, and I'm here with Emma Seppala. She is a scientist at Yale. You've studied for 25 years happiness, and we're talking about specifically how intuition can help us be happier and more successful. You don't see this, the idea of your intuition, as a luxury anymore. Like maybe somebody would have said that that's not appropriate in the business world, or who cares about intuition? We want facts.
Yeah.
That's outdated thinking, according to your research.
Well, 85% of CEOs say they use their intuition.
Yeah.
So it's
do they talk about it though?
Yeah, I mean, they're using some form of internal guidance, and sometimes scientists will consider intuition as your brain working in the background, picking up cues and information that you may not, realize you have, but that your physiology, your intellect is picking up somehow from the environment, from your interaction with people.
So when we talk about, say, even for hypnotherapy, we talk a lot about the subconscious mind. That subconscious mind is 100 million times more powerful, and the rational mind is more like, okay, keep me safe from the reptile. Does that mean our intuition is sort of the same as our subconscious mind, or are they different?
I think the subconscious mind probably has something to do with it. But again, it's complex, right? There's the physiological aspect, there's the subconscious aspect, the emotional aspect. So it's actually quite hard to pin down, but almost everyone will say that they have had a moment where they acted out of their gut.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember an Oprah episode, maybe many years ago, which I tell my daughter about, my son. There was a book, something about fear, and said we're really the only animals that we don't listen to it. And like this woman got into the elevator because she didn't want to be rude, even though her whole body was like, don't get in that elevator. And there was a sexual assault. And that just, you need to listen to, like when your body's telling you something. We have warning systems, we have guidance. You can say where that comes from. People might have different faiths about what that is, whether it's just your body or it's a divine source. But we really, we're wired with this and we need to use it.
Yes, and we're programmed out of using it because we've dismissed it. But indigenous cultures, traditional cultures, this was just part of their way of living. And for some reason in our culture where we just are really like top down, like I think, therefore I am, you know, we've kind of dismissed the whole feeling aspect. And that's also, I mean, if you look even in terms of emotions, you're supposed to leave them at the door and all these things. It's kind of how our society's been built up. And yet we're now starting to understand that we have other forms of cognition and other parts of our brain that we don't even realize have these other capacities.
And I'm sure that in your research you've come across this, but I did another interview once that this was interesting, it stuck with me. It's probably 10 years ago, but there was a nun who also then became a neuroscientist, and she talked about the studies that show when we look at the brains of monks and nuns, there's this part called the cingulate. They meditate a lot, they tend to be into that part of the brain that might be the seat of your intuition or your parts where you can really relax into, but that cingulate is bigger in nuns and monks. Idea that we can train ourselves to get better at this.
Yes, and research also shows that when you meditate a lot, your brain also changes in terms, especially in terms of its attention networks. Attention also on the inside. So meditation, I would say, is probably a really great tool if you are looking to improve your self-awareness, your internal awareness, and therefore also the awareness of the cues that are coming your way from within. But as you were mentioning from that woman who stepped into the elevator, even though she was getting these red flags, is that we have been so trained out of even honoring those feelings that we have.
Like she didn't want to offend the person in the elevator.
Yes, or
who would become the attacker.
Right? And we don't want to look different, and we don't want to disappoint by, you know, all of a sudden deciding, oh gosh, you know, my wedding's in 3 days, but I'm having a feeling I shouldn't go for it. You wouldn't believe how many people I've spoken to who were like, I knew I shouldn't marry that person. That's a big decision.
And they did anyway.
And they did anyway.
Because the fear of undoing what's already led up to. But what you would say that if someone's listening and you're getting these intuitive hits, it's really important for us to listen to them.
I think, you know, especially at first you might be nervous about it, so listen to it for smaller decisions, you know, and get to know whether your intuition is feeling accurate. You know, you don't have to make any huge decisions, but what my neuroscientist friend Joseph Michaels, but also Lynn Tilton say is weigh both. And Joe says, you know, I like to consult my feeling. You know, I have all the facts, but I make sure to consult my feeling. I think that's a really rational and a nice approach.
And we all have a process, I guess, becoming more aware of that. Like me as a journalist, I might get a lot of facts. I might call a lot of experts and then weigh it all. But that helps me maybe be confident in the feelings.
Yes.
So I guess we need to understand our feelings, understand that they're absolutely real and powerful. But you wouldn't want the facts to overturn your intuition.
Yes, and also always being aware. Is this intuition or is this my fear?
Yeah.
Is this, you know, so.
Because they say fear is actually an acronym, false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
So we need to know. Is there a time, any kind of research that you know that helps of like, you know, we've talked about this, we like everything now. We want to be, you know, we're always rushing things. Intuition probably doesn't work on our rush time schedule, I'm sure. So how much time, if there's an ideal thing when you're trying to decide and tune in?
I would say, you know, try to have sovereign mornings. What I mean by that is a morning in which perhaps you don't look at your phone until 8:30 or 9. You spend time, maybe walk your dog in nature, maybe meditate, maybe just make yourself breakfast without also tuning into the news and listening to a podcast and doing all the things that are constantly barraging us with information. We take in over 60,000 gigabytes of information across all of our news and media every day. So, you know, it's kind of gets crowded in your mind. So making moments, like you said, of silence. Perhaps it's a sovereign morning. Till 8:30 a.m., I'm not taking in other information. And then after 8 p.m., again, I'm creating a space and silence in my day. That is, you know, also going to help you tune into yourself, get grounded, get centered. It's also going to lower your stress levels because you're not always taking in information. You don't even know what's coming at you, right? When you turn on the news, you know better than anyone. You turn on the news, you don't know what's going to come at you. That might elicit all sorts of emotions and thoughts.
And obviously, I think as a journalist, I use my intuition in my field as well.
Yes.
I'll get an idea of like, I really should ask that question, or
Yes.
that answer didn't feel true to me.
Yes.
So those of us who are working in high stress fields or business, our
Yes.
intuition really is part of ourselves. And
Yes.
what your book has found, what your research has found, among other things, is that in order to really be sovereign, we need to honor all parts of ourselves.
That's absolutely right. And make time to connect with ourselves. And I think in many ways we've become so distracted and so busy and so stressed in our lives that we forget that. But once you start to connect with yourself, with your body, with your mind, with your spirit, through your meditation, through silence, through any practices that allow you to be with yourself and in a kind way, as opposed to like a highly critical way, or it is going to allow you to become a more integrated and whole and sovereign person.
You're a mom of 3.
Yeah.
How do you teach this to your kids?
Well, I do have my kids in little meditation programs. There's one actually starting this weekend that I have my
You do?
oldest in. Yeah.
How old are your kids?
6 and 9.
Okay.
I try to minimize screens. We do almost no screens. And I know that's hard.
Good
you know
for
what?
you.
It's hard.
It's really
I'm
hard.
not
Well, I
gonna
have
lie.
teenagers, and I feel like I might have missed the boat a little bit. I do screen time. Their phones shut off a little bit, but I have a daughter who's going to go to college in a year, and I really encourage them that meditation has been something that has changed me, and if you want to call it something else, just, you know, some stillness.
Yes.
But I do worry that they want to look at their phones all the time.
Well, it's not their fault. The phones have been programmed to be very addictive. And so even just creating space for the silence, for the let's put our screens away at a certain time of day. It's hard with teenagers.
Yeah.
That's what I've been trying to do.
Or
with
times
others.
like, I think it's great that schools are now really telling everybody to put them,
Yes.
because then they're not worried. But if for some, it might not be sitting. Like for my son, I think I see him become really peaceful when he's in the water. He loves to surf.
Yes.
So you could be doing something you love, playing tennis, athletics, you know, something where you're just in the focused moment. I also get a lot of aha moments if I'm at a gym and I've just got the music on and I'm blocking out the world. So it doesn't,
right.
you don't have to be still all the time if
You
that doesn't
don't.
work for you.
That's right. You could be hiking, you could be running. There are many activities where you're just allowing your mind to be.
Yeah.
And as you're doing, and maybe your body's active, maybe your body's still, whatever is happening. Maybe you're in nature. But that in itself is you're starting to connect again with yourself instead of always taking in information.
In all of your research, what's one thing, as we wind down our time, I could talk to you forever, but the book, let me let everyone know, I'll put it back on the screen, it's called Sovereign, and there's a lot of science behind this. Reclaim your freedom, energy, and power in a time of distraction, uncertainty, and chaos. So we only have 1 minute left. What's your final thought you would like to leave people with to perhaps encourage them to gain something from what you've learned?
Well, having looked at the science of happiness for 20 years, I can summarize it in one sentence, is that the happiest people who also live the most fulfilled and healthy lives are the people who live lives in some way characterized by compassion or service, balanced with self-compassion. And that seems to be a really magic formula.
So watch that inner critical voice. We want to talk to ourselves as if we were talking to a good friend.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Emma, thank you so much for being with us and for coming to us down. We're so happy to have access to wonderful people like you at Yale, so we appreciate it, and I hope you all get a copy of the book. Thanks for being here, everyone. Have a great day, and be well.